Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Martin and I'm from GOsC Osteopathy at our Herning branch. I'm in the process of making a whole series about paddle related issues and how osteopathy can lend a helping hand so you can become a better paddle player and avoid too many injuries along the way. Today we're going to talk about what kinds of injuries are typical when we talk about paddle players and what we see in the clinic. How we as osteopaths would approach and try to manage these injuries. So we need to start with the hand. When we grip the paddle and get the game going, we need to hit the ball as well. It's really important that all 5 fingers can move, and it's also crucial that our carpal bones, which we have a whole bunch of down here at the base, can move freely in relation to each other, because it's really the entirety of this system around the hand that allows the body to compensate when experiencing pain in this area. If, for example, we have a blockage, let's say 2 or 3 of these carpal bones can't move optimally, and when playing paddle you force the hand to twist or bend one way or the other over that blockage in these bones, then over time what we call inflammation can develop, meaning an irritated state in the area, and in that way we might experience that it becomes really sore and bothersome when we press on it, or generally when we play paddle we do this and it always hurts right there. This could be because there's something down here that isn't moving optimally. So as a starting point, as osteopaths, we look at whether things can move, whether there is optimal blood supply to the area. Can new supply get in and can waste be removed from there? And we also look at connective tissue conditions. So when I talk about connective tissue, I'm thinking of it like when you cut an orange in half, the white netting that's in the flesh. If it's from one, you've probably tried it. When you start peeling the orange, you can see that it starts to stick in one corner because this white netting just doesn't really let go. It's a bit the same when we talk about the connective tissue in the body. Connective tissue is everywhere, so we start from the idea that the body is a single unit that can actually be affected from several different places. But back to these injuries you might experience. The next place we'll look at when we talk about the hand is also the forearm and elbow, because as you can see here, we have 2 bones that make up the forearm. When we move our wrist, these bones also have to be able to give to some extent, especially when we need to rotate, meaning when we do a backhand or a forehand stroke, or for that matter, if you need to cut it off, then there also needs to be a certain amount of movement in the forearm as well, so that you don't end up experiencing pain in your wrist. So between these 2 forearm bones, there is also a membrane, and through that membrane, blood supply also runs to and from the hand. Plus, of course, some nerves that make the muscles contract, that is, move. The forearm also helps optimize shock absorption. So when you hit the ball and the impact occurs, it creates a kind of shock, and the forearm helps to relieve that. In other words, the forearm acts as a buffer, absorbing and distributing the force that is generated during impact. This is important because the next area that the force will travel to is the elbow. So you can see how crucial the forearm is in protecting the rest of the arm from excessive stress and potential injury. Hand, forearm, and elbow are all very closely connected. So when it comes to the elbow, we naturally look at the general large elbow joint. Can it move? Can you bend and straighten your arm? Can you rotate it? Then we're back to the forearm again, because there are some small joints up here that need to be able to rotate against each other. And we also look at the muscles that run across the elbow. There are a lot of shots, we prefer to say, when we also include the forearm. But this is just to say that all these elements are important, as well as knowledge about the nerves that supply the muscles located down here. The blood supply that runs down to the area, and we're talking about the elbow, forearm, and hand. Where are they located? Where do they pass through? And where might they potentially get pinched? These are the kinds of things you look at. The next area where you can get injured when playing paddle is around the shoulder area. And what typically can happen is it's either that we get an overload or overuse, as we call it, of the muscles around the shoulder, or that we can get impingement of some of the small, more stabilizing muscles. Among others, there's one that comes up from underneath the shoulder blade and then runs out and attaches here on this side. When we lift the arm above the head, a rotation needs to happen inside the shoulder joint to make room for some of these structures that run out and attach here. If we have just a little bit of tightness in the front, which many of us have, or if there's something between the shoulder blades that doesn't move optimally, then this can't really happen as it should, and that can lead to impingement under here. It can also happen if you're a bit too eager to stand and catch the ball up here because you don't want it to hit behind you and you want to block it first, or if you smash wildly, then this area can also get compressed a little. It will swell up, turn red, take up space, and then so it becomes really swollen. The next thing that can happen is that we have a whole bunch of different bursae located up here. So a bursa, what it does, among other things, is absorb shock, help reduce friction, and generally make everything work a bit better up here. It can also become irritated if it gets too much compression, pressure, or general strain over a longer period of time. So that's also a structure around the shoulders that you need to be aware of when we talk about paddling. The next thing is the spine itself. As I mentioned in one of my other videos, the back is designed to be able to do either rotation, side bending, forward and backward bending. And depending on which part we're talking about, whether it's the neck, thoracic spine, or lumbar spine, some of those areas prefer to do one movement over another. So what you need to be especially aware of is can it actually move? Because when you make these quick changes in direction, when you have to reach down and grab something quickly and so on, it can actually cause quite a bit of damage to both muscles and some of the joints if there are too many places along this chain that don't want to move. It can be due to muscular reasons. It might be that some of them have tightened up beforehand. It could be because you have a job where your ergonomics aren't exactly great, or you have a very repetitive, or it could also just be that you've played paddle a bit too often on something that wasn't really optimal from the start, so it gradually builds up over time. We know this from all sorts of other things. So free mobility in the spine is really important, but the next thing is also about stability around each vertebra all the way down. There we have some small muscles and they help to stabilize. Ideally, they should be able to activate before you actually start making the movement you need to make. It's like a foundation for stability. All the big muscles, which are actually the primary movement muscles, are usually not the ones that are affected, unless of course we use them way too much, so they become overloaded. But generally they are usually strong enough. When we talk about the spine, some of the small stabilizing muscles can be a bit more challenged because they are small. So that would also be an area you could target with relevant exercises. The next one we're coming to is the knee joint. Then we have the one with a foot on it. Here it is, because the knee joint can do flexion and extension. It can also do a little bit of rotation, but it's actually not too fond of that. So when we talk about padel and we make a lot of quick changes in direction all the time, there are some structures inside the knee that can become strained. Here we're talking about ligaments, cartilage, and of course there are also some muscles that work across the knee which can become irritated. We have some blood supply and we also have some nerve tissue. All these structures can get a bit irritated if there is too frequent twisting and turning across the knee. So these are the kinds of things we need to address. We look a lot at how the pelvis moves because many of the muscles that run over the knee actually originate from the pelvis. How does the knee itself move? Can it bend and stretch as it should? Can it perform the small amount of rotation it's supposed to? How does the lower leg move? Because just like in the forearm, that also affects how the knee functions. Many nerves run down that way. A lot of blood supply also runs down that way. There are both structures that drain the knee, meaning they clean up in the knee, at the back of the knee. But there are also structures that need to come in and supply it, and come in from the front and take care of things from that side as well, because we have some menisci, cartilage, etc. in there that also need nourishment. So again, stability is really important, optimal mobility is really important, and we also need to look at whether there are any areas where these blood supplies can either be affected, maybe a bit pinched, or they can be strained because the muscles are too tight, the connective tissue is too tight, or there is a lack of mobility or flexibility higher up from the first bone, where it initially comes from. The last thing we need to look at is the foot, and it works a bit in the same way as when we talk about the wrist. There needs to be free mobility in the bones of the foot and the individual toes. There is muscle tissue running across the foot, which also shouldn't be too tight. There are nerves that affect the muscle tissue, which can become Where are they located and how can we influence them? The same goes for blood circulation. You've heard a bit about that by now. There are some bones in the foot that are especially important. And if you can sense it here, there's a bone in the front, right when we get under the big bone that runs down here. The bone that sits there needs to be able to glide a bit back and forth. And that's what should allow the foot to bend up and down a bit more freely, of course together with all the other factors. But precisely that bone is quite important for many of us. Well, then it can get a bit stuck here, and that can cause muscle tension up towards the back. It can also just make you sore across the ankle joint, and it can also mean that some of the other bones down in the ankle and the foot in general have to compensate. Because of the lack of mobility happening up here, you can typically spot it if, for example, you're sitting on the floor on your knees with your lower legs lying flat and you notice that you get sore across the ankle here. Or, in general, if you're out for a run, for instance, and you actually have trouble lifting your foot upwards, like when you need to do a hurdle step. It feels sore, it feels difficult, it feels stiff in a general way. Then it might have something to do with the small bone that sits in there. Also, if you've had a tendency to spread out a lot over time, well, that can also affect that bone, and it can impact some of the others down in the midfoot, which are especially important when playing paddle because of the changes in direction, because of the fast pace. And we also know that in general, footwork and the technique involved when playing paddle are super important, and here the foot is extremely important for you to be able to do it optimally, together with the knee, together with the muscles, and so on, as I've talked about. But now, this is just to give you a bit of an idea of what can go wrong when playing paddle in relation to the head, lower leg, knee, spine, shoulders, elbow, forearm, and hand. So thank you for today, and I hope this has given you a bit of understanding of what kinds of things can go wrong when playing paddle. Why does it go wrong? What is it that osteopathy can help with here? And then I'll see you in some of the next videos where I'll also talk about new things related to paddle and osteopathy. You'll also get some tips for possible exercises you can do at home. So let's take it from there.